Hey everyone, and welcome to this exciting new episode of the Cupco webinars. Today we are going to be talking about how you can actually skyrocket your social media success by getting content right. And today we are talking not just about content in general, but we're going to be talking about pharma content as a specific sort of animal and type of content. We are aiming to do this because we do see that there's a big need for this in the industry, especially in the healthcare and wellness industries and health sciences. And we thought we would try to help out, So here we are with Mass, my favorite senior strategist colleague from our strategy team, and myself. And hi, I forgot to do my intro, but my name is Andy, and I work as an associate strategy director at Cupco. So today I'm going to be helping out here, jumping in as a host, who otherwise would be actually Mass on all the other webinars, which of course you can feel free to check out. They can be found on our website, such as this one. But I think without further ado, maybe we should get right into the slides and start discussing how pharma and health sciences brands and companies can get content right. How about that, Mass?
Sure, sounds good.
Cool. Let's get into it. So, as I mentioned before, we're going to be talking about pharma content and how brands can get that right. And I think Mass brought an extensive well of knowledge in this case. So that's what we are going to be going through here. And of course, as I mentioned, today's presentation is brought to you by Mass mostly, and a little bit by me. Mass, please say a few words about yourself if I can ask you.
But there's not much to say. As the slide says, the grumpiest guy in advertising. I don't know what that comes down to. Maybe since I've been doing this for almost 20 years, so a lot to be grumpy about. Maybe I don't know. But yeah, I've been looking forward to this. Been doing some extensive work on pharma content, and really looking forward to take you and our audience through all the insights, all the thoughts, and we'll have an agenda soon. But taking you guys through everything of this, because it's I think it's very valuable to go through it. As you said in the intro, also we have seen harsh examples of sort of content missing the mark on doing pharma content in the right way.
But let's go through the agenda here. So Mass will be first explaining how you can choose the right topics for your brand, depending on whichever area of healthcare and health sciences you are active in. Then we are going to go through how you can actually start developing your content after you chose the right topics. And after that, we will have 3 more chapters. One on how you can actually stand out in the market and differentiate from your competitors, of course, in a nice way, and how you can actually also activate people, given the fact that we are focusing here very much on social media, and how you can actually create engagement with your content. And last, but of course not least, we will be also telling you tips and tricks on how you can actually scale the content once you figured out what you are trying to create and what is actually also working for you and what is actually successful at engaging your target audiences and essentially just in general your audiences and people. Let's just jump right into it. Here you go, Mass.
Thank you so much. For all the ones who know the reference, today we're sort of choosing the red pill of this because now we're going to be tumbling down the rabbit hole of social media, pharma content, the production, as Andy just said, everything that goes into doing it right. And I'll start out in quite a, how do you say, a fun way, because we start out with the first rule of creating content around pharma. And I love this quote due to it myself coming up with it, but it's just saying, stop trying to sell medicine or a solution. Show acknowledgement, compassion, and understanding. Because we've seen so many examples of big companies trying to push, sell, really market both product, how do you say, efficiency and so on, but in so many ways miss the mark that what we're dealing with here is challenges in private persons' lives. It's challenging getting up in the morning. It can be excruciating pain and so on. So it is, and it's changing not only the person's life, it is also changing family lives and so on. So it is so important to show the acknowledgement of the disease, the challenge, that it is not the same like for everybody, and that these diseases and so on changes lives around the people, both for yourself and the people that you're with. That's why it is so important to, as they here, show acknowledgement, compassion, and understanding of all of these aspects, because it trickles into how we also create the content around it. So the first one, as you said before, and how to choose those right topics, because it is really just me sort of guiding into this, how to do this right, and of course we've practiced what we preach, so we also want to put some value behind all the words that you're going to be hearing today. The first one is, as just said before, the understanding of it, the understanding of the disease disorder. Me and Andy, as strategists, don't have a medical education. So every time we do this, we go deep into what are the problems, the challenges, what is the everyday life for all these patients and so on, so that we understand it thoroughly. Because then we can start looking at what is the communication that these patients, these people actually need, and what will help them, instead of us just pushing a product out there. The other one is broadening the perception about the patients and the people and the disorder, disease, and so on. Just instead of just looking at it for through a narrow lens, just sort of broadening it, saying it goes beyond just the person itself, the patient itself. It goes beyond the family. It even goes into society and so on. So that's why also the tonality around it in the broad perspective needs to be right. Then we have formulating the campaign targets as human-centric, not measured in sales, as said before. Stop pushing products, looking at how to say revenue and so on. Remember that this is real people that we're talking to. It is real lives, real people, real diseases that we're talking about. So do it in absolutely the best way, and stop focusing on the sales. Because if you do the other thing right, then of course the sales will follow. And then in the end, the finding the insights and information that unites the audience, because we've seen so many examples of content around pharma that creates new new questions and so on, that misguides the audience and the patients and so on, and it creates more questions than it actually answers. It creates more myth than the were before, and then the whole understanding of the disease and the products and so on get extremely cluttered. And when we're talking about real people and pharma and so on, it's like math. There is no maybe. It's yes or no. And when you're in the middle of this, you need the clear answers. So that's so important to give that. The insights around sort of developing the content is that we did a campaign not that long ago where we sat down and we had a chat about it, and saying, if we just come up with one voice trying to explain all the aspects of this disease, because there several diseases it's just not, well, then your arm hurts. It is, there's so much more to it, and that's why one voice can resonate with all. So we need different representation in your communication of all the aspects of the disease, the challenges, also whether you're our family, colleague, peers, and so on. And often when we do the pharma content, we also communicate or talk to the ACPs, the healthcare practitioners, around this, and also provide them with information. So we need to make sure that we get everything right and that we cover all the aspects of it. Patients and people are different. That is extremely important to remember, that not one size fits all in all of this. And also the way that they're affected, as said before, the challenges vary so much. So also need to find the things that unites, that are common, or at least have the room and the realm to go through all the different aspects. Spread knowledge, don't lecture. Sort of you're passing on a lot of valuable knowledge for your audience in these campaigns. And the last thing you want to do is come with that sort of that lifted finger. You don't want to do the lecture and so on, because we need to meet our target audience, the patients, and so on at eye level, and show that compassion, acknowledgement, as we talked about before. Debunk myths and misperceptions, and don't create new ones. This has been one of the ones that we've seen so many times, that the communication around a certain product, disease, and so on, it clutters the information. That there are myths, especially around some specific diseases and disorders, where the audience just running around like they don't know what to listen to, and when they start googling, and then they find 40 different forums and so on. But if you have the brand, if you have the genuinity in your brand and the trust in your brand, then you also become the source for the right information, and you want to live up to that. So that's why that the most, I would say, important role in this is to debunk all the myths and misperceptions of the disease, disorder, and so on, and then debunk and never creating new ones. The messaging, as said before, it is like math. There is no either or. It is yes or no. Because the thing when you start to debunk is that it changes doubt into knowledge, and then it clarifies all the next step. Because that change is extremely important. Because when you start changing the myths into to knowledge and all of that, then you clarify, you declutter the communication, and then you make it way more valuable to the audience that you have. So that are actually sort of that's the intro steps, Andy. I don't know, any questions or
I do have one, and
any thoughts around it?
by surprise, the question is also somewhat plotted on the next slide. So once you found out what topics you are actually going to be targeting, and what insights you can use to actually, do all this debunking, for example, and engage with
Hmm.
your audience, how can you actually start to produce content and do so in a manner that actually helps your brand to stand out? Because I think what you said before is brilliant, and I think from a content marketing perspective, a lot of us out there, and a lot of people sort of like have somewhat a perspective already on like, how do I find a topic, and then like, how do I debunk
Yeah.
things? Because as you said, it's like math. Like, there is a yes and no answer. Like, what is the correct one here? And brands just need to focus on giving the correct and right information that people are actually in need of. But I think what's going to be really
Yeah.
interesting here is that, like, how can they do it in a way that actually stands out on this otherwise crowded digital space?
Well, let's look into it then. Because as I said before, pharma is about people. It's about patient disorder challenges. It's about real life. So we need to show the real life of the real people. That is one of the main ways to stand out, because we've seen our brains are, how you say, it's so optimized right now to spot an ad like instantly. We get it right away, and then we automatically just hit skip because we've so used to it now. So what it says here is that we want to show the real life of the real people, those affected and challenged, how they fight, how they had ups and downs, how they won, and how they celebrate all the good days. Because also when we're talking about pharma, and often we show the challenges, the disabilities, the grim side of it, and we should, because we shouldn't hide the truth. There's no beating around it. We need to show the harsh reality of it, but that's also the reason why we need to show how people win, how they overcome, as it says here, how they fight, and so on. Because talking about pharma challenges, disorders is also about giving courage to keep fighting and believe that you're not alone. There is sort of help on the way, or at least these great companies are doing research to help out, and fighting every day to secure that their patients, target audience, and so on get a better life, and the life that they deserve. So all of this is very human centric, as you can see, and it is very humanized. We're talking a lot about feelings instead of just pushing sales and just a product.
Yeah, it feels very emotional also, as I can imagine.
It is. Yeah, exactly. And that's also when we shoot the content and produce the content, we're often on location meeting these patients. And it is very emotional. We learn so much. We meet both elderly people, we meet very young people, kids, parents, and so on, and then we get all the insights of all how to say how their lives changed, and not only the patients but also everybody else's. So that's why, then again, these are the real people, real lives, and real stories to tell, and that is what we want to do. We want to tell those stories because it helps in so many ways with the debunking. It's about guiding, it's about giving hope, talking feelings, emotion, overcoming the challenge, and so on. So as it says here, we want to tell them the best way possible, so that we in the end create the broadest understanding and compassion. The genuinity, as mentioned before, is extremely important in everything that we do. It of course we do, and hopefully you'll be nodding to this one. We know we're in marketing. That's what we do. We're in this world and in this industry of marketing. So of course we create ads and campaigns and so on, but that doesn't mean that it can be genuine. It needs to be. We need to tell the real stories and just not putting out ads. So we can combine all the information that we have with a great storytelling about these people and so on. We show the progress towards a brighter future. We remember where and when the content reaches the audience. That's also extremely important. Is it when times are hardest? Are we giving a recess in the middle of everything? Because often, for example, when you and I and were scrolling through social media, often we're sort of shutting off the brain, and then we're entertained. And we talk so many times about, but it's the same for all patients. Everybody's sort of in within the pharma, that when you're going through your social platforms, you're being entertained. You're taking a small recess throughout the day and everything. So we don't have to force upon the harsh reality on and all the dark elements of the disease and pharma and so on. But we have an opportunity to give that smile, give that small pause, and entertain, but still providing all the knowledge that we want to, because it also comes down to knowing the value of the information that we're showing, and we need to know how it helps all the patients, the peers, the families, and so on, by getting this right information. So when you have these sort of steps in order, then it all trickles into some extremely well founded, genuine content on your social channels.
Yeah, and I think without going too much in depth here, I think it's it's in general quite difficult to find purpose sometimes in advertising. But I think whenever it comes to pharma and whenever it comes to marketing of pharma, I think knowing the value of the information and knowing the value that you are creating with the content you are sharing in these people's lives is just insane to me. That's
Yeah.
one of the reasons I think I think why we all love working with this whole subject.
Exactly. And we need to honor that opportunity, because you and I, in our time in advertising, I at least I have a feeling that I've sold or marketed everything, from video games to candy to shoes, shirts, to movies and so on. I marketed everything, but all of this is something that's nice to have. It's sort of it's add-ons in everyday life. This is actually, it's hard to find content with a better purpose than this, because we're actually, and this is our the big words, but we're actually changing lives and sort of guiding and creating that genuine level of information with everything that we do around the pharma.
Very true.
So if we move on to, I brought a few examples of what I really see as campaigns that definitely hit the mark on sort of, and some of them it's not necessarily about pharma, but it's about the human insight, how we act, how we are. It's about diversity, inclusivity, and being sort of honest and not beating around either a problem, a situation, or a challenge. So let's jump into the first one. The first one is prep. It is pharma. It's medicine, but it is so simplistic, and I just love everything about this. That it's about the human emotions. It's about not giving up on love because you have a disease in your life. And then on PrEP, it allows you to express the love and the need you have for human interaction and sex and so on. So I think they nail it with this one. It's just one pill once a day, protect against HIV. And it doesn't need to say anything more because the picture says everything. I really love that one so much. And here's why it works, because it's debunking all the misperceptions. Because again, with HIV, there's so many. Then you can touch about how about sort of affecting the ones that you sleep with and everything. It comes very close to the people involved or challenged by this disease. So then again, the human centric point of it, uniting the audience, creating that broad understanding, and then clarifying the steps that goes into being within the treatment or using this product. The other one I brought is an example from Puma, the sports brand. But it's about how or what we see when we close our eyes and imagine ourselves the best way possible. That we all, when we are together with other people, we can seem confident, successful. That people think that we might look good and have great hair days, some better than others. Andy, I'm looking at you right now. But it that necessarily isn't the truth, that we can be sort of questioning ourselves, low confidence and everything. So this is all about only seeing great, what is the greatest aspect of you, and overcoming the challenge that you might have in your life, no matter what it is. And they used a lot of celebrities in this one, as you can see from the visuals. But what I really liked about it is that they took, and what we said before, that one voice can resonate with all. It definitely they succeeded, how to say, coming around this with this one, because they took several voices and activated in this one. Differences are strength, that you're not the weird one, but differences are definitely strength. Facing the challenges, just overcoming them, and then showing genuinity, that you really know what you're talking about, and that you've done your research, and it is a very genuine campaign and message that they have in this one. The last one, I saved the best one for last. I adore this campaign so much. The Bergastrina digestive pills for helping out with the stomach issues. This is, as you can see here on the visuals, it blew my mind. I find it so amazing. I think that the insight level of this is just, because I don't have digestive problems, but I've been in situations where it can be, how do you say, we all been in situations where we don't want to fart. Let's say that. So we've all been in those situations, and this is patience. It's a disorder that really creates that problem in how you say, on a scale that you can imagine. And this one is so good because it's simplified down so much without exposing anyone. And I even think that I would call it cute, and it's so clear what it wants to say. Because the human insight, spot on. Understanding the challenge, oh my god, yes, by putting those loud instruments into the people, that's how they see themselves in those situations. The different ways to be affected shown by the different instruments, and then simplifying the information into a level where everybody gets it right away and fully understand the challenge and so the elements of this disorder.
Wow, those were some really great examples, and I think especially the last one. Yeah, you are right, Mess. You saved the best for last. I think it's also super interesting to see that, like, they all put like different instruments into like the different people. It's not just about like, okay, we have this insight on like, okay, we all kind of sound like, different instruments in different ways and situations maybe, but I think it's also about like we don't all have the same problems and we don't all have the same sounds and so on. So I think it's also just like showcasing the diversity of the problem, of the people dealing with this problem is just so spot on. Super cool. Thanks for sharing those examples. But I think now we are like sort of zoning in and sort of coming to the very end of this webinar soon. But before, I think it's also interesting to discuss how can we actually create engagement and discussion on social media, because I think whenever it comes to social media, most brands are having trouble with this aspect, not just coming up and finding the right topics and figuring out the right insights to work with, and then putting those insights into the right creative concepts that can then be translated into contents, for example, like the last examples we've seen. But then how do you activate those in a social way that will actually get people to engage and discuss? How do you do that, Mass?
I know one of the best sort of insights or chats we also had about all of this is that um, when we go back to the one where it says one voice can resonate with all, that we need to hit those marks right, and then you, if depending also on the size of your audience, then when you have the different voices and so on, and you show the different aspects of the disease and the challenges, everything, we talked about having that moment where that one specific individual within a target audience of millions maybe look at the content that you created and says, that's me. They get me. They understand what I'm going through. They get how I'm challenged. So now there is a very genuine connection through that, and that is what we aim to do in all of the content, is having that said, sort of the broad awareness around it, but then again also understanding every aspect. So we have the situations where all the patients and people living with these diseases look at it and say they fully get who I am and how this affects me. So in the steps of sort of creating the engagement, then it is, as it says here, talk directly about your topic. Don't beat around it. Be very direct about being, and not being dark, grim, and so on, but talk directly about it, because it is a part of people's everyday life. So sort of cut out the bullshit. Just be very direct about it. Answer the questions in the content, so that you don't create the new questions, but you actually answer the ones that are there. Also, when it comes down to social, as we always say, make your post visually interesting. It needs to be, and I'll say this in quotation marks, thumb stopping. Everything that we do, we want to be thumb stopping, but it needs to be visually interesting, and that's why the digestive one in the last example is just, it just hits that mark so good. It's so simple, bright colors and everything, and it's very interesting, and that's also what we strive and succeed with in all the content that we do. Understand where you stand in your niche. So it comes down to understanding our own, or the not our own, but the brand's position in that niche, saying this is, where is it that we do all our communication from, what is our standpoint, why are we here. And we are here as the provider of all the right information to, and providing all the right answers to all those questions that are out there. Then also we do a lot of social listening, a lot of social media management, community management here at Cupco. So when we do these campaigns and we see a spikes in mentions, engagements, and so on and so on, we always look into what was it that either triggered, resonated, and so on with the audience in a very special way. So we know how to build upon that, and leverage that in the future. And then the sixth year is a bit different, but then again, forget everything about classic engagement. And leading into that is sort of likes, shares, comments, reactions, and clicks, and so on. And of course, a lot of these campaigns, we have landing pages with extra information. We would love we love sending people there, of course, elaborating on the information that we give on social. We want people to react. We also want them to come and sort of share their stories. We want them to share our content, of course, and of course we also want them to like it. That's so not what I'm saying with this. We want all of these, but there is more to it than just this when we're talking about pharma content, because we want to know what the brand sentiment around this is. Because when we analyze the sentiment around it, that's also how did we hit the right tonality? Did we approach this disease disorder, so on, the right way? And we want to make sure that our audience is perceiving the brand in absolutely right way, because since we're talking so much about human feelings, everyday lives, for good and for bad and so on, we want to make sure that both the perception and especially the sentiment around everything that we do is right, because you can't focus on compassion, as we said in the very beginning of this webinar, and acknowledgement and understanding without looking at the emotional reaction amongst your target audience. Because if you then, and going back to not selling anything, if you only look at KPIs of reach and sales and so on and so on, my strong claim would then you sort of miss the point of all the communication that you're doing around pharma. Emotional engagement are more than just a like, because when we look at it, it's sort of here put into an iceberg visual example of saying, of course, we want people to see, to observe what we're doing, following the how to say, all the communication that we're doing around it. We want them to follow us. We want them to engage with it. We even want them to endorse what we're doing if we did it right. But then in the end, contributing to what we're doing is the major factor in this one, because we often encourage, or not even directly, but through the content that we're doing, there is a level of encouragement in sharing the real stories from the patients. So that supports the agenda of making sure that none of the patients thinks that they're alone, that they're different, and so on, so that they know that they're a part of a community and they're definitely not alone in the battle that they go through in their life and in every day. So the contributing factor is where you interact, where you contribute to the campaign by sharing your story, your aspect of it, and even through that, just helping out others and helping us understand the disease and the communication that we're doing even better. Because, and this is just a short one, when we're saying analyze the sentiment, it is absolutely monitoring dimensions. We have here at Copco, we have the community management department monitoring everything that we do around the mentions and the reactions and so on. We analyze it, and then we calculate the social sentiment score, just to see, are we nailing it? Are we performing in the right way? Did we miss the mark on any of it? Because the social sentiment score is so important, whether they love us or hate us, but at least if they interact and then engage with what we're doing.
So I think now we are coming to the point where we are rounding up this whole presentation. And again, Mass, thanks for sharing all those really valuable insights. I think once a marketeer, a pharma brand knows all these things, one more very important thing that they need to know is how they can actually create this content on a scalable way. Because I think what I'm also seeing out there is that pharma brands are having a tough time producing enough content and sometimes putting out enough content. So I think it's also about like, okay, once you found out what is actually resonating with your audience and what they need from you, how can you actually provide that to them on scale? So please tell me a little bit about that as well, because I think me and also our audience here is just like probably super keen on hearing about this a bit as well.
One of the things that we've noticed when working with pharma clients is that they have an immersive amount of information just sort of put in storage or hidden on a website, put in white papers and in big thick books and so on, sort of hidden, and definitely not made social media friendly or formatted in the right way. So one of sort of our first task is also to look, what do we already have that we just need to tell in the right way to make it social. And then we also look into, as this one, how do we scale it in the right way so we get even bigger and broader. So this is all about turning the smaller pieces into big pieces, the other way around, and so on. So with the first one saying, compare the performance of the already existing content, sort of what can we learn from that? Then we leverage on existing long form content for creating social media content. Is that what do we already have laying around that just needs to be put in the right format, making it very social, and making it very how you say, short format, and adapted into to the right platform, and then test what the audience is interested in through shorter content on social media, saying don't put that one piece out and then wait a week for people to do something. No, put several out, see what works, what doesn't work, test them out, A B, all that, all the classic moves of that. But since we're talking about diseases, disorders, challenges, and so on, I said before 100 times before today, but there's so many aspects to it. So don't put that one piece out and think that that answers everything. So test the different ones out, the different angles of it, and then I guarantee you that the audience will react and show what worked and what didn't. Analyze the performance of social media content as ever before. It's nothing about sending out just fingers crossed and then we hope it performs well. We definitely need to analyze everything that we do, so we see whether we hit the mark or we didn't, or it resonated in the right way, and then implement the learnings in short form and long form social media content, saying what are the short pieces that where we come with very direct information, valuable information around it, and what are the more, not storytelling, but what are the long formats the way we go deeper into the challenge of disorders and so on, and we often have the small social bites out there being the gateway or the segue into the long form content. Sort of, if you want to know more, then we also got you on that part. So with all that said, there is conclusion or conclusions to all what I've been talking about for at least half an hour. If we just dive straight into it, as said in the beginning, stop trying to sell medicine or a solution. You're selling, or not even selling, you're showing, how do you say, you're being compassionate, you're being genuine around real people with real stories. And you need to show that in the absolutely best way on social. As it says here, acknowledgement, compassion, and understanding. Talking directly about the topic, no beating around it, because yeah, we have, how to say, built-in bullshit filters when we're looking at ads and so on, especially when talking about diseases and challenges. The bullshit needs to be cut out. Answer the questions on the content, making it visually interesting, understanding where you stand in your niche, and then forget everything about classic engagement. Make sure that you know who you're talking to and that they interact, engage, and contribute to the efforts you're doing. Because if they start contributing, then you definitely hit the mark with all the communications that you're doing.
Yeah. So I would suggest
Yep.
all pharma marketers print this page and put it somewhere near your screen, because wow, that's a great list there.
It's gonna make your printer run out of red, but
That's probably true. Black and white is probably also fine.
yeah, it'll work.
So after you printed all that, if you are interested in creating the best pharma content ever, and why you wouldn't be, because I think, all the conclusion stuff is looking really nice, but you probably need some help with putting all that into practice. So if you're feeling like putting all that into practice, feel free to call us or email us. You have both our email and phone number on this very slide. And of course, in any way, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and the metaverse, or wherever you see our brand. If you say Cupco, just say hi, just give us a follow, connect with us, and we won't be shy. We promise. We will connect and say hello back at you. So thank you so much for tagging along. And well, first of all, maybe thank you, Mass, for delivering all this
Of course.
all this premium information and knowledge, and also firsthand experience. I think it was awesome to just sit through it and be a part of it, and maybe sometimes just drop in some questions, and I think people could see that I was like all the way just like nodding through this presentation. So it was also really resonating with me as well. And yeah, thank you so much for that, and thanks so much for listening and tuning in. And again, if you liked what you've seen, make sure that you check out all our other webinars as well, or you just get in touch with us, because here at Cupco, we make sure that we can skyrocket your social media.